Alright, so Fujifilm just announced their newest camera, the Fujifilm XH2-S. So in today's video, we're gonna recap all the important information about it. And I will also give you my opinion about this newest flagship camera from Fujifilm. Let's get started. Alright, so first let's talk about the ergonomics of the camera. So the XH2-S comes with the same grip as the XS10, which compared to the X-T4 is a bit bigger, and overall gives a much better grip than the X-T4 or the X-T3. It also has a flip screen, and I assume some people will like it, some others won't, but it seems that this camera is more tailored towards videography. So for videographers, I can definitely see the usage of this particular flip screen. Another point that will divide the Fujifilm community will be the PASM dial on the top of the camera, instead of the usual dials that we are used with the Fujifilm cameras. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of it, but I can understand that for videographers you don't necessarily need those dials, and you can have a simple function dial where you can adjust all your settings on the go. So this PASM dial additionally comes with 7 custom positions that you can adjust based on your needs for either photography or videography. You will use the dial on the right side to adjust your settings with a dedicated ISO, white balance and custom function button. On the back side of the camera, we will have the usual AEL, Q, display buttons and menu functions. However, we can see that the joystick has been moved up a little bit. So personally, I like where the joystick is positioned on the X-T4, so I need to try out the XH2-S to see if it's a better fit or not. It is also important to notice that the viewfinder has also been improved because it now supports up to 5.76 million dots compared to the 3.69 million dots that you can see on the X-T4. The refresh rate has also been increased to 120 frames per second. So basically it will give you a better experience in terms of image quality that you can see, but also refresh rate. Alright, so now let's talk about the ports on the Fujifilm XH2-S. So when it comes to the ports, I think that Fujifilm really listened to its users because we have 2 different microphone and headphones ports, dedicated jacks. So no need for a dangle anymore with the USB-C like it is the case on the X-T4. Additionally, we also have the HDMI Type A that is also present on the camera. And to be able to support the high throughput that this camera delivers, which we are going to talk about in a second, we now have a SD card reader, but also a CF Express Type B port. And finally, we also have on the other side of the camera a remote controller jack that you can use if you're using this camera with a gimbal or in a waterproof case, for example. So the XH2-S comes with the backside illuminated, stacked CMOS X-Trend sensor. I already made a video about this sensor and how it will help the XH2-S to have better performance, and you can check this video right here. But basically, with its new sensor and its new processor, the XH2-S provides better performance for both video and photography. So when it comes to video, the numbers that you should remember are 6K 30p with a full sensor readout, 4K 120p with a 1.1 factor crop, and 4K 60 or 30p with no factor crop at all. Supposedly, and I say supposedly because I could not try it myself yet, the XH2-S will be able to shoot continuously in 4K 120 FPS for 40 minutes, 4K 60 FPS for 1.5 hours, and this is without the addition of an external fan that you can also purchase. Now, apart from performance only, what is pretty good with the XH2-S is the codecs that were added in the camera. The Fujifilm XH2-S will now support Apple ProRes and Blackmagic RAW. Now, while the Blackmagic RAW will not be supported internally, as it will be only supported through HDMI with an external recorder, ProRes is supported internally. And having an APS-C camera capable of outputting raw data is extremely great for videographers and cinematographers who wants to use the Fujifilm system to do so. I think that this is one of the arguments that pushes this particular camera to be used by videographers, and we can also see that Fujifilm during their summit and their different announcements, especially the 18-120 f4, I think is quite tailored towards videographer. And finally, Fujifilm also introduced F-Log2, which is an F-Log with higher dynamic range, but also higher base ISO. Now, I cannot pronounce myself yet on this new log profile because I don't have access to the camera, but I'll make sure to test it out whenever I try this camera. When it comes to still, the XH2-S will support 40, 30, 20 frames per second using the electronic shutter and up to 15 frames per second using the mechanical shutter. According to the specs provided by Fujifilm, you should be able to shoot up to 140 frames continuously at 40 frames per second, 180 frames continuously at 30 frames per second, 800 frames at 20 frames per second, and 1000 frames at 50 frames per second. So it seems that this camera is also tailored to sports, action, or wildlife photographers. Autofocus has also supposedly been greatly improved, and several detections such as animals, bird, train, airplanes have been added to the cameras. It's important to notice also that the Fujifilm XH2-S also support output using the HEIF format, which is basically a more efficient format compared to the JPEG. This camera will be released on the 7th of July at a base price of $2,500. Now if you compare it to the X-T4 and it's $1,700 now, it's definitely a huge jump. But when it comes to its functionalities, you also have a jump in functionalities. You have now 6K output, 4K 120p, Blackmagic RAW, Apple ProRes, and I'm only talking about video right here. When it comes to stills, you also have up to 15 frames per second with the mechanical shutter and up to 40 frames per second with the electronic shutter. So this camera is definitely all about speed and all about video. It will be a great tool for sports photographer, wildlife photographer, and anyone who is in need to capture action all the time. Also for cinematographers who wants to play with raw footage, this camera will become a great alternative to other cameras with micro four thirds sensors without losing the Blackmagic RAW or the Apple ProRes capabilities. Now personally, I do not photograph sports nor wildlife that much, and I don't have enough upcoming video projects to justify purchasing an XH2-S. However, I was quite interested about the XH2H. I think that they will announce it September and that they teased a little bit during this summit. So I think that I will save my money for that one, as it is supposed to come with a higher resolution and more tailored, I assume, towards slower way of capturing things, but with higher resolution. So let me know in the comment if you plan on getting the XH2-S or if I forgot anything important about this camera. And make sure to subscribe to the channel if you want to know more about other lenses that were announced during this summit. Thank you for watching and see you in the next one.